Picture this. You're on a tropical island surrounded by crystal clear waters and golden sandy beaches. Life is good, and you're enjoying everything that paradise has to offer. But what if I told you that there's a place on this very island where people commit crimes just to stay a little longer? Welcome to San Antonio Prison on Margarita Island, Venezuela. In this prison, life isn't what you expect. Instead of cramped cells and austere surroundings, you'll find a pool, a restaurant, and even a boxing ring. It's a surreal sight to see prisoners lounging in the sun, enjoying the facilities with their families. It's easy to forget that this is a prison. I had the chance to tour this fascinating place, guided by a fellow prisoner named Ricardo, who was jailed for drug trafficking. His enthusiasm for the prison was contagious, and I was eager to learn more about what makes San Antonio so unique. Join me as we explore the surprising world of one of the world's toughest prisons, La Sabaneta prison in Venezuela. As Ricardo led me through the prison, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a full-fledged restaurant, complete with barbecued chicken and other mouth-watering dishes. The smell was intoxicating, and it was clear that the food was prepared with care and attention to detail. But the surprises didn't stop there. We stumbled upon a sparkling pool, where prisoners lounged in the sun and swam with their families. There was even a boxing ring, where inmates could train and compete against each other. And as we continued on tour, we saw pop-up kitchens and food vendors selling everything from traditional Venezuelan dishes to snacks and sweets. It was a far cry from the bleak and dingy image of a typical prison that I had in mind. Instead, it felt like a bustling community with plenty of ways to stay occupied and make money. And the prisoners seemed genuinely happy to be there. In fact, some even looked forward to weekends so they could enjoy the pool and other amenities with their loved ones. It was a surreal experience, and one that challenged my assumptions about what a prison should look and feel like. But as we would soon discover, the unusual facilities were just the beginning of what made San Antonio Prison so unique. As we continued on tour, Ricardo introduced me to some of his fellow inmates and their families. It was clear that family connections were incredibly important to the prisoners, and the prison administration went out of its way to accommodate visitors. In fact, visitors were allowed to stay over the weekend, and many took advantage of the opportunity to spend more time with their loved ones. But life in San Antonio Prison wasn't just about family connections. Inmates had opportunities to make money and work as hairdressers or barbers for visitors. I was surprised to learn that many of the visitors were women, and Ricardo explained that they were made up of the majority of his clients. The prisoners were even allowed to operate their own businesses within the prison, selling everything from snacks to souvenirs. Despite the relative comfort of life in San Antonio, it was clear that the inmates were still aware of their situation. They knew that they were prisoners and that they were expected to behave appropriately. But they seemed to genuinely enjoy their time in the prison, and many even said that they felt safer there than on the outside. As we wrapped up our tour and said our goodbyes, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, it was heartening to see that the inmates had found some measure of peace and contentment in a difficult situation. But on the other hand, it was clear that life in San Antonio was far from normal, and that the prison was an unusual and unique place. As I continued to learn more about San Antonio Prison, I couldn't help but wonder, how was such an unusual place even possible? That's when Ricardo introduced me to El Conejo, the rabbit, the powerful jailed gangster who ran the prison. El Conejo was known as a Prane, one of the most powerful gangsters who controlled all the prisons in Venezuela. It was his authority that kept the prison running smoothly, and he was the one who gave Ricardo permission to show me around. As we walked through the prison, I could see that his influence was everywhere, from the prisoners who deferred to him to the enforcers who carried concealed weapons. It was a strange feeling to see such a blatant display of power in a prison setting, but as Ricardo explained, there were no guards in San Antonio. Everything was controlled by the Pranes and the prisoners themselves. And in a country where violence and chaos are all too common in prisons, it was clear that El Conejo's tight control was actually solving a big problem for government. But as we would soon learn, the consequences of this unusual power dynamic extended far beyond the walls of San Antonio Prison. As I delved deeper into the world of San Antonio Prison, I began to realize just how much power the Prains, and El Conejo in particular, held over just the inmates, but the entire prison system in Venezuela. The Prains were initially the ones who controlled all the prisons in the country, and they did so with impunity. As Carlos Nieto Palma, who runs Window for Freedom, a non-governmental organization that monitors the prisons, explained, the government has little to no control over what went on behind bars. The prison's minister, Iris Varela, was criticized for her lack of knowledge and her inability to address the chaos and anarchy in the jails. It was a sobering realization. Despite the seeming comfort and stability of San Antonio Prison, the system it represented was deeply flawed. The Prains were able to organize crimes from within the prisons, employing kidnappers and orchestrating crimes with their mobile phones. And yet, as Professor Neely Perez from the University of Venezuela pointed out, everyone knew about the situation, but no one seemed willing to confront it. It was clear that the power dynamic within the prison system was a complex one, with consequences that extended far beyond the walls of San Antonio. As I continued to learn more about the Prains and their role in Venezuelan society, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for the country's prison system. Despite the challenges and controversies surrounding the prison system in Venezuela, the government remained committed to promoting what it called a penitentiary revolution. The prison's minister, Iris Varela, was a popular figure who championed the transformation of prisoners into new people. I had the chance to see Varela in action when she visited another prison for a special sports day. It was clear that she was invested in the well-being of the prisoners, and she believed that her initiatives were making a positive difference in their lives. But as critics like Carlos Nieto Palma pointed out, the situation on the ground was far from ideal. The lack of government control over the prison system had led to chaos and anarchy, with the Prains holding all the power. It was a complicated issue, and one that I was continuing to grapple with as I reflected on my time at San Antonio Prison. On the one hand, it was heartening to see that the inmates had found some measure of comfort and stability in an otherwise difficult situation. But on the other hand, it was clear that the system was deeply flawed, with no easy solutions in sight. As I leave the prison and return to the outside world, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for the prisoners in Venezuela and for the country as a whole. The consequences of the Prains' control over this prison system in Venezuela were far-reaching and complex. On the one hand, their authority had helped bring a measure of stability to the prisons, with inmates able to live relatively comfortable lives despite being incarcerated. But on the other hand, the lack of government control had allowed criminal activity to thrive behind bars, with the Prains able to organize crimes from within the prisons and even employ kidnappers to carry out their bidding. As I reflected on my time at San Antonio Prison, I couldn't help but wonder what the long-term consequences of this situation would be. Would the government be able to reassert control over the prison system, or would the Prains continue to hold all the power? And what would be the impact on Venezuelan society as a whole? One thing was clear: the situation was a complicated one with no easy solutions in sight. But as I thought about the inmates I had met and the families I'd seen, I felt a sense of hope. Despite the challenges they faced, they found ways to make the best of their situation and build meaningful lives for themselves. And as long as that spirit of resilience and determination continued to thrive, perhaps there was still hope for the future. Thank you for joining me on this journey to explore one of the toughest prisons in the world. If you found this video informative and eye-opening, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And as always, stay safe and thank you for watching.